welcome back everyone. It's so good to see you again. I want to ask how your week was, but in interesting times as we currently live, that is a loaded question. So it's like, how was your week? Yeah, mine too, probably, pretty much. And that is the acknowledgement I will give it, because the point behind this channel is one of those things where it's like, should I speak up and say something more? And I don't want to be one of those channels where it's like, I don't get political because everything is political. But here's the thing, everybody needs a brain break, and that's what I'm trying to do here. This channel is your brain break. So that said, disclaimer over, here goes. Some time ago I did a video on the novel Quo Vadis. It was the best-selling novel it was one of the best-selling novels one of those years, and it's in there somewhere. It's in my playlist. I can probably link it in the description. I'm still learning all this stuff. Anywho, Quo Vadis was an incredibly popular novel and still is to this day, and there have been several movie and television adaptations. And of course, most everyone, even nowadays, knows the 1951 version. That was the big epic big tent version. But there were a few other versions too, and I watched them all. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. It really is quite fascinating. Here we go. First off, I did cover this in my other video, but just real quick, let's cover the basic plot of the novel, because of course we will be comparing it to the plot as told in the movies. Quo Vadis was originally written and published in Poland from 1895 through 1896, because it was originally serialized, as was so many novels of the day. It is written by Henryk Sienkiewicz, who is this dapper fellow. I bet he's a blast at parties. The novel is set in ancient Rome and carries a pro-Christian message. Sienkiewicz did a lot of research into the Roman Empire, so good for him. He was really trying to get it accurate. We start the novel with Marcus Vinicius, who is a member of the Praetorian Guard. He is coming back to Rome after having been out doing guard stuff, I presume. He goes to visit a retired general acquaintance of his, Aulus Plautius, sometimes called Paulus, who lives with his wife Pomponia. There, Vinicius, I'm just going to call him V, I usually do. There, Vinicius spots Lygia. By the way, all the pronunciations are best guess, as they are in the versions. The pronunciations are all over the place there. Lygia is more or less a hostage. Her dad was a barbarian who Rome fought with and conquered, and in return for leniency or whatever, Lygia was transferred to Rome. Now, Aulus and Pomponia have basically adopted her as a daughter. They're very kind to her, and they have become this little family. They are also Christian, as is she. The Christians are a minor sect that lives in Rome and aren't really taken much notice of. When they are, they're looked down upon, but so is every other sect. So now, Vinicius is like your typical Roman guard in that he is very much a product of his system. He is used to, he sees, he wants, he takes, as long as he has the emperor's permission to do it. He sees Lygia, he wants Lygia, he engineers to have her removed from that house and taken to Nero's court. Even though nobody's happy, she has to do it. Once there, Lygia meets Actea. Actea used to be a favorite of Emperor Nero, and she still loves him, but she has fallen from favor. She just kind of hangs out at court now, doing what she can when she can. She takes Lygia under her wing and prepares her for the big fancy banquet they're gonna have. Also at the court, we meet Nero's wife Poppaea, who basically uses her position in order to get what she wants and uses her influence on Nero when possible. While she is stuck in Nero's palace, Lygia is taking a tour of the gardens with Actea when along comes Nero and Poppaea's child. It has run off from its nurses, and Lygia is enchanted and talks to the child and gives it a little hug. Poppaea comes along and sees this and takes the child back and doesn't think much more of it until the child later sickens and dies. The blame is put on Lygia as a sorceress, and this is another black mark against the Christians generally, as far as the Roman elite are concerned. Now, Vinicius corners Lygia at the banquet and basically acts like a real, what's a polite word? Jerk. He acts like a real jerk and does not get on her good side whatsoever. Nero, who likes pretty women as well as all other pretty things, spots her, but he is dissuaded by the smooth-talking Petronius. Petronius is Vinicius's, that's hard to say, uncle, and he is known as the arbiter of elegance. He also is very much a product of his space and time. He is cool with it, and he's also a pretty cool guy. He helps Vinicius in many things. So anywho, Vinicius asks Nero to have Lygia taken to his house so that they can become man and wife necessarily, but also she has to do it. She doesn't get a choice. Nero gives his permission, and Lygia is taken to Vinicius's, I'm just going to call him V, to V's house in a litter, but she is rescued by a group of Christians and escapes off into the night. Now, V is really upset by this, so Petronius, is worried about his nephew's well-being and takes pity on him. He hires the philosopher, which is in quotes, Chilo or Kylo, I'm going to go with Kylo, who is, let's say he's an opportunist, really, is what he is. He has eyes and ears on the street, and he can find stuff out. So, he is hired to find out what happened to Lygia. Kylo establishes that Lygia was Christian. He goes undercover to find her. He tells V that the community is going to meet outside the city at night in secret to hear the Apostle Peter give a speech. So V decides to attend the meeting in disguise, hoping to find Lygia. He hears Peter speak and is strangely moved by the words, but then he forgets it all when he sees Lygia. He follows her to her hiding place, but is stopped on the way by Ursus, who is her bodyguard, big guy. There's a scuffle, and V gets wounded in the process. Ursus feels really bad about this, and he takes V to the house where Lygia is hidden. She and her friends there nurse V back to health. During the process, she falls in love with him and tells this to Paul. Peter and Paul are both in this, and he says she can't marry someone who's not Christian, so she runs off again, basically. This all takes some time, but once V is fully recuperated, he goes home, and he's kind of changed by his experience. He starts treating his slaves more kindly, and Poppaea has got the hots for him, but he rejects her. Kylo comes in and tells him he knows where Lygia is hiding now, and tells him, you better go in with soldiers, and V actually has him whipped because he's so ticked at him. Kylo swears revenge on V, but V goes to the hiding place alone. He meets Peter and Paul there and promises to convert, and then he is engaged to Lygia, as Paul blesses the union. Next up, Nero has decided that his court needs to go somewhere outside the city. They go to the neighboring city of Antium. Nero is very full of himself as an artist. He is composing a poem about the burning of Troy, and he regrets that he has never seen a real city burning, because an artist must have inspiration. Now, on the heels of this, later in the day, the news comes that Rome is burning. Now, V immediately hops on a horse, has to switch on the way, it's quite a ways, to check on Lygia. He finds Lygia, he rescues Lygia, and Peter then baptizes him into the faith. Nero, who is incredibly clueless, returns to Rome and sings his poem that he made up about Troy, and the crowd then accuses him of starting the fire. Nero's court, who is smarter than he is, decide that they better get a scapegoat, and quickly. Tigellinus, who is the head of the Praetorian Guard, brings up the idea of the Christians. Kylo was the one who whispered the idea in his ear. Peter has been convinced by his Christian cohorts that he must, being their leader, he must leave Rome for his own safety. So he does with one companion. As he's walking along the road, he sees a vision of Christ, and he hears a voice saying, Quo Vadis, Domine, which basically means, where are you going, Lord? The message to Peter is that if he leaves, then Jesus will have to return to Rome and be crucified all over again. Peter realizes that his place is with his people, so he goes back to Rome to be with them. Petronius, who is a very good smooth talker, almost mounts a successful protest, but Poppaea is still ticked at V, so she overrules him. Chilo then gives up the hiding place of the Christians, and the guards come in and arrest them en masse, including Lygia. Nero, who is very big on entertainment, plans a series of quote-unquote games at the Colosseum where the Christians will be put to death in various interesting ways in exchange for the fire. V manages to sneak in and visit Lygia a couple times in prison, even though at the end he's trying to get her out, but he can't manage it. At the end she does get a fever, and he really can't manage to move her then. So there are a few ways that Nero goes after the Christians in the Colosseum. One, of course, is he releases the lions. Another one has them put up on crosses, and then there's fire involved. It's not a pretty death. And at seeing this, Chilo is fully aware of the consequences of his action. He repents immediately, and he publicly accuses Nero. Chilo is, of course, taken into prison. Paul tells Chilo that he can get salvation if he really does repent of his actions, which gives Chilo the courage to die bravely the following day. Throughout every ordeal, the Christians, although scared, resolve to die bravely. And that part, it is very hard to read. Even to this day, there are even parts with children involved, and oh boy, never easy to see that in a story. Now, a big part of the final show involves Lygia and Ursus. Ursus is brought out into the arena alone, and then they let loose a rampaging bull. However, it's not just a bull. Strapped to the back of the bull is Lygia. So Ursus has to manage to face off the bull without harming Lygia. There is a hustle, a tussle, and Ursus does prevail, killing the bull, unfortunately. This is the crux of everything. The crowd has been moved by everything they've seen, and the public sentiment forces Nero to spare both Lygia and Ursus. Everything comes out into the open, and the populace of Rome realizes that it was Nero's fault all along. Petronius has just about had it with Nero and his antics. He's never had any respect for him. And given the machinations of Tigellinus and other court foes, he realizes his influence over the emperor is about done. So since he's going to die anyway, he engineers his own death, and in true Petronius fashion, being the arbiter of elegance, he invites everyone to a dinner party at his house. There's music, there's dancing, and then he makes a pretty little speech on how he is about to take his own life, which he does in front of everyone. And he is joined by his former slave, Eunice. She has fallen in love with him, and he with her, so he frees her and tells her that the house is hers. She, however, doesn't want any part of it and decides to join him as he goes. Nero retreats, and before the mob can find him and tear him apart, he is convinced to take his own life. Lygia and V are married, and they move off to his mansion in Sicily. Ooh, hard times. Okie dokie, that was a lot. Now on to the film versions. There were apparently two versions initially in 1901 and 1910. They are considered lost films, and I can find nothing about them. There was also an opera, a stage play. I mean, this one's been done all over the place. But for now, let's concentrate on the film and television adaptations. (1913), an Italian version, which is, of course, silent. We skip straight to V and Lygia being an item, and Petronius promises to have Nero give Lygia to Venetius. The first time we see Elijah, though, she is playing ball with her adopted brother, which is accurate. Elijah gets taken to the palace, but Ursus follows her. V macks on Elijah at the banquet. Nero sings. Poppaea leaves. I don't know why. There is a lot of debauchery at this banquet, although understandably less than is in the book. Lygia and Actaea meet Poppaea in the garden. Accurate. They ask Poppaea to intercede on Lygia's behalf, but she is cold. V orders Lygia born to his house. The Christians abduct her. Nero accuses Lygia of being behind his daughter's death. Kylo tells V he has found Lygia. Pretty accurate so far. They go to see Peter speak. There's the scuffle. All accurate. While he's recuperating, he sweet-talks Lygia, and she likes it, but then she gets scared and runs off to, I presume it's Paul, who berates her before Peter's all like, chill out, dude. Poppaea comes on to V. Kylo informs V of Lygia's whereabouts. V goes to visit her. Kylo gets whipped and vows vengeance. Pretty much. In this one, though, Nero actually gives Tigellinus direct orders to burn Rome. So, not so accurate there. Rome burns. This is accomplished on a budget thanks to a lot of possibly toxic, given the time, smoke machines. Inspired by the sight, the newly arriving Nero sings to the populace, and they ain't digging it. Petronius chills them out with a speech. Again, all accurate. Now, at this point, Kylo and V go to hear Peter speak at a secret gathering of the Christians, so this is kind of moved around. The populace is still restless, and Nero points out that as Tigellinus was the one who burned Rome, he is a ready-made scapegoat. So to save his bacon, T and Poppaea together contrive, at Kylo's suggestion, to have the whole thing blamed on the Christians. Petronius speaks out. Poppaea's not happy, but it is Kylo who gets in Nero's ear. And Nero then sends out his guards, after all Christians. Petronius and V find out Lygia has been taken prisoner. V confronts Kylo in the public square, and he has been rewarded greatly for his contribution by Nero. Petronius has fallen from Nero's grace. Interestingly, the accustomed classic Roman salute is used in this, which is a salute that has not stood the test of time. However, this movie was made in 1913. V learns that Lygia is on the chopping block, but she's sick, so she's not going to get executed right away because they only want to execute well people for whatever reason. Now, this is an interesting part. This version then has some chariot races, which is pretty cool, followed by some other gladiatorial sports. And the Christians are sent out to be fed to some really pretty chill-looking lions. Kylo is overcome with remorse at the sight. Now they send out Lygia on the bull, followed by Ursus, who pins the poor beast really quickly and rescues her. Possibly it's quick because the person strapped to the bull sounds cool. But when you see it, it's basically a person going, blah, 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 getting jounced around, and it doesn't look as impressive. Anyway, the crowd calls for mercy, and Nero has no choice but to give in. Petronius gives the feast, and all of that is more accurate than I had expected. Now, the final torture of the Christians takes place in Nero's gardens, where the human torches, basically. This is also accurate. Kylo fingers Tigellinus and Nero for all crimes before his absolution by baptism. Nero flees, but then ends his life. And that is pretty much it, which makes sense as this was a 1913 silent, and they were usually pretty short. This was not a D.W. Griffith, basically. Quo Vadis version 1924. Need I say this is another silent film? This one, though, also an Italian version, but this one has star power. This has the late great Emil Jannings as Nero. In this one, Christianity is already outlawed right off the bat. We see Peter preaching in secret. We also meet the sneaky Kylo, which is here he's called Kylon. V pops in to visit Petronius, tell him all about Lygia and his love for her. They engineer Nero's order to transport her to his palace. He upsets her at the banquet. Nero gets an eyeful and steps in as her savior. Poppaea comes in to distract him, and Lygia's rescue is effected by her fellow Christians. Nero is strangely proactive in this one, but then again, we have Emil Janning, so again, star power. Nero is basically the main figure of this movie. He goes to a witch to have his future told. Afterwards, he just happens to espy Ursus hiding Lygia. Nero confronts her and begs, Nero begging, for her love. So this is V's scene in the book. Tigellinus finds Nero. Poppaea has sent for him as their son is ill. The boy dies, and Lygia then goes to visit Plautus. The boy dies. Nero determines Lygia must have bewitched him and blames his son's death on her, but he can't find her. Neither can V, but Chilon decides to help him for a price. Rome then begins to burn, and Nero is happy to have a tragedy to compose a poem about. V goes to look for Lygia, a mob forms blaming Nero for everything. He sees a scapegoat, settles on the Christians who are taken prisoner. Next up come the Human Torches. Chilo regrets his turncoat actions. Now, Aulus and Pomponia and their little boy are also in prison. This is important later. Nero proceeds with the gladiatorial spectacles. He feeds the Christians to the lions. Aulus climbs a garland that is hanging down, and it's spread over the entire Colosseum, and he escapes the lions. Chilo enters the arena and fingers Nero as the arsonist before he himself is killed. Nero gets the word that enemy forces are heading for Rome, but he tries not to let all this harshness mellow. Petronius ends his life, accompanied by Eunice. And here's something that's really cool. Pomponia and her son are harnessed to a chariot. Ursus manages to get the boy free, but his mom gets dragged. She manages, in the process, to get free, work her way up to the chariot, and take charge of it, and she wins the race. The crowd loves this, so does this audience, and Nero has to grant her clemency. 1951, the big one. This was interesting. This starts like so many epic films of this period with an overture, but this one is not in widescreen. I had to Google this. Widescreen, CinemaScope, became a thing in 1952, the year after this was released, when 20th Century Fox bought the rights to the technology. So that explains it, but it was so weird watching this in 4:3 or whatever it is. In this, roguish hero type Robert Taylor plays roguish hero type V. Deborah Carr puts on the Bambi eyes to essay Lygia. We have Leo Genn as a sassy and wily Petronius, and Peter Ustinov as a deeply insecure and easily manipulated man-child Miro, here portrayed as very much a man-child. For fellow former kids who grew up on Disney's Robin Hood, this is, as I suspected, pretty much his Prince John character, only more homicidal and insane. As I said, every version has its own pronunciation of the character names. It seems like a lot of the names here are a lot different from other versions. We start with V returning to Rome. He heads to the house of Aulus and Pomponia, where we meet Lygia, who is lighting lanterns. Paul the Apostle stops by, interrupts dinner, and brings tidings of Peter's journey to the city. Lygia and V have a moment in the garden, and he says all the wrong things. In keeping with the 50s epics, this makes use of massive backlot sets, which were probably used for more than one film, and tons of choreographed extras. It's impressive even factoring in the undoubted use of mat work. Anywho, V gets Petronius to wangle Lygia's removal and installation at Nero's palace. Actea gets her duded up and ready for the banquet. V tries his sweet-talking, gets nowhere. Nero performs a song and is magnificently awful. Poppaea macks on V. Lygia is ordered to the house of Petronius, but here Actea is the one who contrives to have the litter intercepted on the way. Eunice confesses her love for Petronius a bit early. He helps V out by getting Chilo involved, directs him to the secret meeting hosted by Paul with Peter as the feature speaker. Here we hear Peter's story of meeting Jesus. the Last Supper, the crucifixion, all of which is accompanied by flashbacks. V follows Elijah, gets confronted by Ursus, gets knocked out, taken in to be nursed. Here he goes to leave, and she stops him by confessing her love. There is kissy stuff. She consents to marry him, but insists that Paul give his blessing on their union. V tells her he'll accept her religion, but then he proves he doesn't get it by placing Christ equally among the other Roman gods, and what he can't accept is her putting Christ in her heart right along with him instead of him being first. Paul attempts to explain how Christianity works, but V is stubborn, and Elijah then refuses to go with him. He is grouchy, but tells her he'll let her alone from now on. The court goes on vacay. Actea confesses her love to Nero, who is plotting over a truly impressive model of the city. Oh gosh, this thing is cool. He banishes her in return. He unveils his model to his courtiers and declares it to be the New Rome, which he dubs Neropolis. Upon which Tigellinus enters to state that Rome itself is burning as per Nero's orders. V rushes off in a chariot to check on Elijah. There are some really pretty bad blue screenshots of Robert Taylor driving said chariot, but this was 1951 after all. It was still decently early technology. The burning of Rome looks pretty good though. From afar, in the models, in the panic crowd scenes, it all works well, and I really wish I could find more photos of it. I should have done it while I was watching the movie, dang it. Proving himself a good guy after all, V jumps in and helps people try to escape through the sewers. Somehow he manages to spot Elijah in the crowd, because of course he does. Nero has ordered the Praetorians to block the bridge so nobody can get out, but V forcibly takes charge and clears the way. The court has headed back to the city to view the conflagration from a hill, and Nero is delighted and performs a song in honor of the occasion. Petronius now realizes his emperor is not only an easily manipulated idiot, but a somewhat insane, dangerous one. A mob comes to the palace. Nero realizes he has to place the blame somewhere. Pinning it on the Christians is Poppaea's idea. They are rounded up, and when he goes to see the prison, so, surprisingly, is V. In the cell, he finds Lygia, Aulus, and Pomponia. We briefly check in with Peter, a young lad accompanying him on his way out of Rome when he sees the vision, and the message is given through the boy that Peter should return. Aulus and Pomponia. We briefly check in with Peter, a young lad accompanying him on his way out of Rome when he sees the vision, and the message is given through the boy that Peter should return. Next up, Petronius has his banquet, gives Eunice her freedom, they both end their lives. Petronius dictates a letter before everyone, telling Nero, in elegant terms, exactly what he thinks of him. When Nero hears the news, he is more concerned about Petronius not asking his permission to commit the deed. Then he reads the letter, which produces a full-on tantrum. In the Colosseum, the first batch of Christians are pushed out, the lions are riled up, which honestly they never look that riled up in the movie, the poor sweet babies. Peter appears in the audience and makes a loud encouraging speech to the Christians before he is pulled away. The Christians start a hymn. They get torn up by the lions while Aulus watches wretchedly from the cell. One of the Christians does attempt to climb one of the decorative garlands, but is unsuccessful. Another group gets pushed out. They are already singing and meeting their fates with courage. Peter gets pushed into the prison cell with V and Lygia and explains why he came back. On break at night, they are officially married by him. In this one, the bull is Poppaea's idea, which is a special fate for Lygia out of her jealousy. The next day, Peter is one of those put up on a cross. Another is Aulus, who also makes a speech accusing Nero. The crowd and courtiers begin to murmur at this point. The crosses are lit on fire. The Christians begin to sing again. The crowd does not seem as amused by all this as before. Guards come, take Ursus, V, and prepare Lygia. V is taken to sit, chained by Poppaea, again at her behest. She knows how to manipulate Nero to get what she wants, and she knows how to bear a grudge. Lygia is led out and bound to a post in an effort to get around the awkwardness of not having her strapped to the bull. Out trots the bull. It really trots so adorably, and the poor thing was confused more than anything. Ursus is one half blue screen and close-ups and one half stunty, but the scene does work overall as it's not too short like some other versions. Ursus does kill the poor little baby bull, and V breaks free, jumping into the ring to free Elijah. Although egged on by the crowd and courtiers, Nero refuses to grant mercy. The Praetorians, however, divide their ranks, and those loyal to V fight the others. V makes another pretty speech, and Tigellinus is killed in the ensuing scrap-up. Nero retreats to his palace, but the mob comes for him. Never one to be at a loss for a scapegoat, he blames and then strangles Poppaea. Octea then appears, and convinces him that he must do away with himself before the mob does. She helps to deliver the fatal blow. A general is then installed as the new leader of Rome, but V, Elijah, and Ursus head on out to the accompaniment of a chorus. Then we have the credits and exit music, like I said, full-on 1950s Hollywood epic. 1985. This is another Italian version, and it is a 6-part miniseries. Each part is an hour. Now, full disclosure, I am re-recording this part because just detailing the differences, I went on for 15 minutes, and this video is already long enough. So just the highlights. Not a lot of big names in this one, however, it does have some star power. Max von Sydow stops in as Peter, and Klaus Maria Brandauer is Nero. So just a detail of some of the changes. Nero in this one is still very much a tyrant and all that other stuff. However, his motivation stems from having had constant attempts on his life even when he was an infant. Somebody came to kill him, and it was just a snake that happened to be lying in his crib that frightened them off. And all this has made him very superstitious. He consults omens and soothsayers on pretty much everything. He also doesn't take his job that seriously, focusing more on his acting. He feels that he really ought to have been an actor in the first place. One of the biggest changes is in V's character. He meets Elijah, who in this one is working on Mosaic. Her character's changed as well because she still stands up for her beliefs, but there's more to her than that. She's more of a modern woman with her own agency. The change in V's character comes in that he respects that and her right off the bat. They become friends, and then their relationship blossoms, and etc. The problem with that is that it doesn't give V much room to grow as a character. His character remains pretty static throughout the whole thing, and it makes him less interesting. Other changes include an investigator coming to Alice and Pomponia's house to question her and see where her religious ideals lie. Now, apparently this is based on something that happened in real life. However, needless to say, it was not in the book, nor any other version. This investigator later ends up dead due to, I don't know, investigating, I guess, and then they have to figure out who killed him. Plus, there is a subplot with a group plotting against Nero and figuring out when they're going to assassinate him. They eventually do try near the end. Octea gets in the way and gets killed instead of him, at which point I was just going, what? Those are some of the more major changes. There are, I could be here for quite a while. Like I say, the original clip was 15 minutes just detailing all the changes, but those are some of the major ones. I do encourage you to check it out. It's pretty well done. You can find it here on YouTube, and I will put the link to the first part below in the description. Last but not least, Quo Vadis 2001. I believe this is another mini-series, it's just there's only 2 parts to it. This is interesting because the original novel was Polish, and this is Polish. I watched it without subtitles, and it was much better than I thought it was going to be. It looked like just a made-for-TV movie. Like, there are many versions where the effects are kind of iffy, but there was definitely some money thrown at this one, with the sets being quite good and the acting being impressive all the way through. Also, I can kind of just skip through this because even though I watched it without subtitles, it was incredibly faithful to the book, so I knew what was going on through the entire thing. We left out a few things, so I'll just cover those instead. There was the actual scene of Elijah being stolen from Nero by the Christians. That wasn't there. I'm not certain we had anything about Nero's baby, but for the most part, everything else was there. The ending is kind of neat. Peter goes to leave Rome, has the vision that makes him decide to turn back. This is at the very end of the movie. When he does so, we see him heading toward modern day, what I presume is Rome, although this is a Polish production. There was no location listed in the credits that I could see, and having never been there, I wouldn't necessarily know Rome if I fell over it, but it's clearly supposed to be Rome. So that was pretty cool. Yes, this version was pretty good, as I say. Even the acting, it looks like just the problems of two beautiful people in kind of a cheap version. It was not that. I definitely do recommend this one as well. The acting was very good. The Nero that they had was very good. Kind of a mix between Brandauer and Ustinov, I would say. Okay, so yeah, right? I thought it was interesting. I hope you did too. That's part of my whole thing on this channel is, again, stories. And it fascinates me the many different ways that you can tell the same story. Especially interesting because I feel that this is one of those novels that's really quite filmable the way it was told. However, not everybody did that. I really enjoyed every one of these versions, and I do recommend that you check them out. I will link down below where you can find them. Well, as of now, streaming services tend to skip around their offerings. So yes, as of now, I will put where you can find them. If not, just do a search or check out your local library if you still own a DVD player. Or heck, some of them might even have a streaming service. I am behind the times and very old-fashioned really because I still watch DVDs, so don't go by me. In any case, do check them out if you can and read the book. It's really pretty good. It's always interesting what perspective you're coming from depending on what was your first exposure to that story. Did you read the book first? Did you see one of these versions first? Because to you, that version is the original, right? And everything else is just taking off and changing that. Next time I do this, it won't be next week's video, but next time I do this, it's going to be one where I saw the movie version, or one of the movie versions first. So I haven't seen the other versions yet. I haven't read the book, still got to work on that project, but I'm very interested to see how that affects my perspective. Okay, so that's enough from me. I will see you all next week. Go and watch more movies and read more books and give yourself a brain break every now and then, because yes, everything is interesting and we have to pay attention to what's going on. But your brain needs a break. Take care of yourselves and each other now more than ever, because how you do that is a very important part of your story. This is my story. What's yours? See you next week. Bye.